Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Hey everyone, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to The Courage Effect, and welcome to today's episode, where we're diving deep into the intersection of courage and self-compassion with my guest, Massimo Backus. Massimo is an executive coach and a leadership consultant who's dedicated his career to helping leaders break through fear and lead with authenticity. He was a former head of global leadership development at Slalom Consulting, and he's worked with many leaders across various organizations, from startups to Fortune 100 companies. What makes Massimo's approach unique is his personal journey of transformation. After receiving difficult 360 feedback, which he talks about very honestly on this show, it shattered his assumptions about his leadership style, and then he courageously embarked on a path of self-discovery. It led to a profound epiphany and just how he could then integrate self-compassion into his world. And today, he is the author of Human First, Leader Second, and host of the Leadership Mind podcast, where he challenges the traditional leadership models that often lead us hiding our humanity in favor of projecting perfection. It really is a great conversation. We talk about leadership journeys, the costumes that we are asked and are given as we go along, and sometimes the ones that we give ourselves. And Massimo really shares, as I said, the powerful story of being a sage on the stage as a leadership development and organizational design expert into somebody who was secretly struggling with imposter syndrome and discovering that true leadership starts with radical self-acceptance and, in turn, radical self-compassion. We'll explore his 6-step framework around self-compassion. We talk about the courage that it really takes to drop those leadership costumes and why he believes that self-compassion isn't soft. It's ultimately the foundation for sustainable, effective, and authentic leadership. Get ready for an honest, vulnerable conversation about what it really means to lead being human first. I was really intrigued when I read Massimo's book about self-compassion, entitled Human First, Leader Second, because I know so many of us, especially those that are leaders, those of us that work within the leadership space, we spend a lot of time thinking about what it takes to be a great leader. And sadly, self-compassion is one of those things that has been deprioritized, if for some people it's on the list at all. So I love that Massimo is bringing it front and center. And I would love, Massimo, as I say, welcome to you. What are the things that bring you to this self-compassionate work and the courage effect?
It's really great to be here, Suzanne. So thank you. And I think about trade and training in our careers and kind of what identity emerges from that. Spent my career working in organizational and leadership development. Along the path, I ascribed to many of the traditional and oftentimes outdated models of leadership, and applied them to myself and certainly with the clients that I worked with in organizations. And then I had the painful yet privileged and poignant opportunity to have an epiphany. And that epiphany was self-compassion. When it was introduced to me and kind of entered my life at the age of 36, I was a high-achieving sage on the stage, expert coach, lauded for my expertise as a coach and a facilitator and a practitioner and an agent for change within organizations. But I was also a incredibly flawed human being who was hiding my doubts and my insecurities and my imposter syndrome and my feelings of not being enough. And I realized that hiding all of those things was doing a disservice to me and everyone around me. And my role as a leader was to be in service of others, to create the conditions where people wanted to follow, because I was creating safety. And I wasn't doing those things because I was over-indexing on my intention of not showing who I was authentically and not letting people see my shortcomings. And the funny thing about this is, if this relates to people that are listening, and I imagine that it does, we think we're pretty good at hiding our shortcomings and our insecurities and things, but the reality is we're not. People see it, and oftentimes we're the last person to find out, and that was certainly the case for me. And since having that epiphany, I have essentially poured my entire craft, my purpose, my soul, my work into creating the conditions for other people to have that epiphany. It's not the only answer to effective leadership, but I do believe that it is the lowest common denominator that, when tapped into, can be the greatest accelerator for effective leadership.
Mm, powerful words. And I love the idea of an epiphany being the gift.
Yeah, I mean, epiphany is one. It's a powerful word. It it evokes this idea of something greater than ourselves. You don't will yourself to an epiphany. Epiphany doesn't come out of just doing. Um, if anything, I think it comes out of doing less and being more, in a sense of surrender. And I think that for me, I would never have come to it had I not fully surrendered and just, um, acknowledged I don't know so much, and I have so much to learn, and I need to lead with that, as opposed to what I was doing before, is leading with, let me show you everything that I do know. Let me show you how great I am, how talented I am, how worthy I am. Um, and and that's a path that many people walk, but it leads to burnout, and it leads to a lack of self-trust, and it leads to eroded relationships with others and with ourselves. Um, and it's also the path that we observe in other people. We learn it from those that have gone before us. So there's no one to blame, but there is an invitation to say there is another path to walk, and it's a beautiful path.
It is a beautiful path. And I'd love for you to talk about how courage took you on that path and what courage looked like for you when you made that decision, when you decided to action on the epiphany.
Yeah. So when I think about courage, and I'm sure that you have a definition, Suzanne, that captures it well, but, um, I think of courage as, acknowledging fear and proceeding anyways. And when I got to the point in my own career where I had to fully surrender, um, that took a lot of courage, because surrendering meant I was going to give up all of the coping mechanisms, all of the beliefs, uh, the parts of my identity that, up to that point, on paper, like, they worked. On paper, I was successful. So why would I give these things up? But I knew that if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to get to the clarity of the answers on the other side. So that took courage to push through that. I also think that crisis, creates those opportunities to be courageous, which is, I've tried everything else and nothing's working, but I believe in something so much. My purpose is so clear. I don't want to give up. And so, one of my mantras to this day is, keep going, keep growing. And the idea of keeping going is, that's just a constant act of courage, especially if you're doing things that you care about, that matter in the world, that are difficult. You got to keep going. And it takes courage to continue to do that. But I don't see it as some, courage doesn't evoke an image of a warrior with a big shield who's, going into battle. I think courage is the small things, taking good care of yourself, setting boundaries, asking for help. These little gestures, I think, are very courageous.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Are you comfortable with sharing a little bit more about that epiphany and how that came to pass?
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, I was running global leadership development for, an international consulting firm, and my team and I were responsible for leadership development programs and executive coaching for, everyone from new leaders, newly promoted or newly hired in, all the way to the executive team. And I was a part of kind of this flagship program, and traveling around the United States and North America, running these, 6-month long transformative leadership programs. And I loved it. And at the time, it was, the greatest job I could have asked for. And I got to be witness to seeing the transformation of thousands of people, those aha, epiphany type moments for them in, letting go of old, um, beliefs that were holding them back, so they could evolve and emerge into, their next kind of evolution of themselves as a leader. And I think at that time, unknowingly to me, I mistook their growth and transformation for my own. I thought I also was evolving and growing because I was surrounded by people that were. Um, and that was naive and maybe some hubris on my part. And as a part of these programs, all the participants participated in a 360 assessment to get feedback from their peers, direct reports, managers, and so on. And I thought that I should do the same. And so when I got the feedback from my team, it painted a very different picture than what I was hearing from the participants and the clients that I was working with. My team described me as a leader who doesn't create psychological safety, that I was defensive. I had one employee describe me as a bully. These are not positive things. No one wants to hear these things. And it was devastating. It was a rude awakening. I felt sad and hopeless and scared and seen in a way that I hadn't been seen before. And that was probably the scariest part. Because, oh my gosh, they saw something in me that I thought maybe I only saw in myself, but I didn't want to admit.
Mm.
And it was very difficult for me to internalize and integrate and really take the feedback on, because my intention was to be none of those things. My intention was to be inspiring and collaborative and create safety and trust and all these things. And so I had a hard time reconciling how could my intention be one thing, and yet the impact that I'm having on the people that I have responsibility for be so different. And I spent the next few months trying to apply all the different techniques and processes and tools that I use with clients on myself to very little success. And what I realized is that I was so in love with my intent of being a good leader, of being liked by people, of being someone who those trusted and supported, that I wasn't able to acknowledge that this feedback was true, even though it was objectively true. This was these people's experience. And thankfully, when I got to the point where I realized I can't do this on my own, I was introduced to something called the Hoffman Process. It was started by a gentleman, Bob Hoffman, in the late 70s. And this was kind of a Hail Mary. I was like, well, I'll go do this, and hopefully this will provide some answers, because my master's degree, the textbooks, the literature, the research, the conversations, nothing else that I've done seems to work. And the program is a week-long retreat. They take your cell phone at the beginning of it, which was like a very shocking idea at the time, of, a week without contact with the outside world. I wasn't able to communicate with my family. And it was in this program of the Hoffman Process, and Suzanne, I'm happy to kind of talk about the methodology of it. But over the course of the 7 days, some shifts began to happen for me. And the first was I started to become aware of this internally critical voice that I had. And aware of it in the sense that it has always been there for as long as I can remember. But since it was always there, it was just kind of in the background. It was window dressing. It was me and I was it, and I couldn't differentiate the two. I didn't realize that it was just a part of me or a voice. And so as I began to see that more as an objective part of me and not me, I could distance myself from it, have greater awareness of it. And I could also move it to the side, which created space for a more loving, kind voice. And that was through a practice of self-compassion. And I remember on day 4, we had just finished this guided visualization exercise. 90 minutes in this guided visualization. I was in a sacred garden with, my childhood self and my spiritual self and my intellectual self, and all this stuff was very woo-y for me at the time and out there. But again, Hail Mary, I was surrendering. I'll do whatever it takes to try and work on myself and improve. And when we came out of that visualization and I opened up my eyes, I remember that I could hear the birds outside the building chirping with such high fidelity, and that there wasn't anything going on in my mind. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And I went for a walk after that in the woods, and I could feel the sun hit my skin and warm my body. And I heard the rustle of the leaves as the wind went through the trees, and all of my senses were heightened. And this negative voice was gone, and I didn't know what necessarily was taking its place, if anything. And I was on my own during this walk, and I just started laughing, absolute hysterical, childlike, abundant laughter, laughing so much that you start laughing more. at how much you're laughing, when you're with your friends and you're just, now, we lost the joke. We're just laughing at the fact we're laughing so much, but this was me on my own. And it was in that moment that I had my epiphany, which was, this is the first time in my life that I had felt what it means to truly love myself. Not like myself, not love my best qualities, or love myself after I've been, praised, or people have given me compliments, or I did a good job, or I succeeded at something, but just for who I was in that moment by myself in these woods, for all of my great qualities and all of my shortcomings, to truly love myself. And a sense of great gratitude that I get to live my life. Not because I'm better or worse than anyone else. It had nothing to do with other people. It's just like, I get to live this life. And it was profound. And I may have shed a few tears, but it was a moment that I'll never forget. And it wasn't forced, and it wasn't what I was looking for. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I had given up and allowed something greater than me to emerge. What shifted for me after that experience impacted all aspects of my life, from my relationships with my wife and my son and my parents and my family members, to my coworkers, to friends, most importantly, because it shifted my relationship to myself. I have been just as flawed of a person since then. I continue to make mistakes. I get things wrong. I have fears. I have doubts. I have imposter syndrome. All of those things are real. But I am able to manage them all differently because I have an ironclad relationship with myself. Because in that moment, I made a commitment that I'm going to work on having the best relationship with myself I can, because it's the only one that I know for sure I'll have until this beautiful ride around the blue ball is done.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And that takes a lot of vulnerability to speak to it. So I just want to recognize that, and for you speaking to it so honestly and eloquently. It's also not lost on me that you were doing leadership development, and that this was something that then you were yourself getting caught up. I mean, in all of the traps, right? The potential pitfalls that happen to leaders. And even though you were the one doing the training and the guidance, you literally had to have that moment of getting that feedback and figuring out what you wanted to do with it. So I just want to acknowledge the fact of, you were open to it, and you really took it, and you went out to seek other ideas. And the idea of what you expected was not what ultimately cracked you open.
Yeah, and I think that the courage in it was just to keep going. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew that if I kept doing what I was doing, I was just going to keep finding the same answers, and that something had to change. And that took a lot of courage, but to not know what it was. And what a gift, Suzanne, to stumble into it. I wish I could say that I found, the power of self-compassion because I'm a great researcher and I did some studies and I came up with this on my own. I stumbled into this like Mr. Magoo. I was blind and struggling, and I stumbled into it. Thankfully, I was awake enough when it happened to see what I really landed on. And as I came back after the retreat and I started just integrating this into my own life and sharing it in relationships, I realized most people don't know about self-compassion. It's not something that's broadly discussed. And if it is, it's kind of seen as a throwaway, a soft thing, or like, yeah, that'd be nice, but we've got shareholders to take care of, or I've got a team that need to take care of, or I'm a servant leader, which means my team goes first. And if I'm going to be nice to myself, I'll lose my edge. And these are all the types of things that I've heard from people, over the years, in the sense that being kind to yourself would be a sign of weakness. And yet if my story, indicates nothing, I don't think there's anything weak about me sharing. The kind of the fire that I walked through to get there, and the courage it takes to truly confront yourself. There's nothing weak about that. It's quite bold, as a matter of fact.
Very much so. And thank you for calling that out. I also, what I'm hearing too is, you talked about you were being so in love with the idea of the leader that you were, that you weren't loving yourself. So it's the idea of I'm going through this process right now of what I call killing my darlings. Like there's certain things that I love so much that I'm like, but this is so important to me. But there's a point where I'm like, am I so in love with the idea versus what it's actually rendering for me, and how might it be getting in my way? And that's really coming up for me with what you're talking about, is the like having that ideal and working towards it, but then recognizing, wait, I'm not working on the core, right? Like there's something really foundational that has to shift for me to recognize and have that just audacious, radical love of yourself.
Yeah, I love this idea of killing the darlings. I feel like I'm going through a similar process, Suzanne, and it's tough when we care about things and we're passionate about them and there's a purpose that is aligned for us. You know, so much of this work comes down to an acknowledgement of where is our sense of self coming from? Is it external validation or is it internally resourced? And I don't think anyone is in the wrong if they find themselves feeding off of external validation. It is the society, it's the system that we live in, it's what we've been raised around, is that I feel good when I did a good job, I was a good boy or a good girl. And there's nothing wrong with those things. The issue arises when we become reliant on them, so that we're fearful that if I do something wrong, I won't get that. And what happens if I don't get that? Then who am I if I'm not getting the validation, if I don't get the promotion, if I don't get the positive feedback? As opposed to going from a perspective of, I'm internally resourced. I give myself the validation and love that I need. And I certainly would love to have a positive impact on other people and be praised and lauded and seen as successful and have a positive impact. But I don't need it. And when it happens, I will take it in with great gratitude and appreciation, but I don't need it. And that idea of who I thought I needed to be as a leader was a leadership costume that I put on because I thought this is who I need to be in order to get the external validation. It's what I had learned throughout my life. If I'm this person, then I'm a good boy, then people are going to like me, then I'll get the things that I want in life. And if I let that go, who am I? Will I not have those things? I could lose everything. Things get pretty dark and scary if you follow that path of logic. But when you're internally resourced because you're practicing self-compassion, you're not reliant on those things anymore. And it's easier to kill the darlings. It's easier to set boundaries. It's easier to take a step back and say, I don't need the person to speak up in this meeting because there's other really smart people here. Because you're grounded in who you are. That is the power of it. And when something is reliant on external validation, it's contingent on other people giving it to us, which means it's not a sustainable resource. We got to go around looking for it. We don't always get it the way we like it. But if we're internally resourced, then it's on tap, on demand, when we need it, when we want it. And that creates something that is very sustainable. And for people that are purpose-driven, for leaders that want to make a big change in the world, we got to have sustainable fuel.
Yes, and I love that whole idea of clean environments, right? I mean, because so much of what we're doing is really polluting. I mean, we're bringing dirty energy in. So the idea of how do we? I mean, I like to say you are your own best tool. So how do we be internally resourced, as you say, and ensure that what we're bringing into the environment is generative, not it doesn't deteriorate.
Yeah. And when you think about internally generative, Suzanne, what comes to mind for you? What are some of the descriptors of that?
For me, a lot of that is the idea of, I mean, something that I struggled with in my life, and something that I had to, when I got my coaching certification, I called it my excavation. So it was like, okay, how do we really go deep and go really deep into these patterns that have served you, but are not necessarily going to serve you where you want to be moving forward, similar to what you were just talking about. And one of those is being a fixer. And so, of course, being a coach, that was one of the things that I had to really go deep on, and to understand that just because I think I know the advice and I want to help somebody, when am I jumping in when I'm not necessarily needed? And for me, it's about understanding that other people have, unconditional positive regard. They have the solution. They don't need me. Like, what ego am I bringing by being the fixer? They are their own best tool. So how can I help them cultivate that and me at the same time. So that to me, it's that larger symbiotic relationship of knowing that what we bring is not about having the coach to help you or having a team to bolster you, or executives or whatever it is in a leadership workplace. Is how do I know that I am doing the work that is meaningful to me, that I am bringing my best self forward, that I'm not burning out, to your point as well, because there's always going to be requests of me. There's always going to be an ask. And I need to have my idea of, is this aligned with who I am? Does this get me the results that I want? Is it aligned with my goals and also the organization? Because it's so easy to put others first rather than yourself.
Yeah, and the sense of obligation that we have. If I
Yes.
don't say yes to this, what will they think of me? And you could say, well, if you do say yes to this, what will you think of yourself? There you go again, not honoring a boundary, or, over-indexing or needing to fix, or what have you. I think of this as Keegan and Leahy, these two brilliant Harvard professors, wrote a book about deliberately developmental organizations. It's called An Everyone Culture, is the name of the book. And in it, they talk about that employees, by and large, have two jobs. They have the job that they were hired to do. It's on the job description. It's on your title. And then there's a second job that we all occupy too, which is the one where you're trying to project the person that we think that we need to be. And so we hide our inadequacies, our insecurities, our imposter syndrome. We play politics. We try and navigate the trust game. And we avoid, being authentically ourselves, but also just having authentic conversation. And those are the places where we say, I don't really know the right answer, or I don't know exactly what the outcome for this conversation is, but I know that we need to have it. Or I know that trust is at risk in this relationship, and it's important that we address it. The types of difficult things that we need to do that take courage, we avoid all of those because we're playing this second job. We're in this leadership costume, as I call it. And it takes courage to drop that. And it doesn't have to happen overnight, but it is the biggest waste of time, energy, and resources in organizations today, by and large. And people know that because it doesn't just occupy the hours of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. The people that you and I talk to that were ruminating about something on the weekend, that's all the second job, because we're avoiding it and we're not addressing it. And the fear comes from, if I change this, if I address this, I'm not going to get the external validation that I need. Because fundamentally, I believe that all people want to be seen, heard, and loved. That's what we're aiming for in everything that we do. And if we are afraid that we're not going to get that because we changed something, well, then come hell or high water, we're not going to change it. And that's where these patterns that you're talking about, Suzanne, come in. And we all have them, and they still come up for us. I don't think there's ever a point in our lives where we're done working on these things. But I do think there's some really powerful concepts that can help us make meaningful progress on it and allow us to catch them more quickly. This idea of me being defensive, I may have been the most defensive person on earth at this time in my life. I got defensive if my wife would make a comment about the way that I load the dishwasher, which, by the way, I still don't know how to load the dishwasher. And she's just trying to help me out and say, hey, there's a better way to do it. But I would get so defensive about it. And that's just a small example, but it happened in all cases. Well, being around someone who's defensive all the time is really difficult. It's off-putting. It doesn't create the space where you feel like you can speak your mind. And I didn't realize why I was doing it until I did the courageous work of trying to peel back those patterns and realize I'm defensive because the moment I do something wrong, I beat myself up incessantly. And so I'm really kind of being defensive against myself. She says you didn't load the dishwasher right. I say, Moss, you're a dummy. You screwed up again. And that's the battle that I'm playing. So why don't I rewrite the story about me not being a dummy just because I don't load the dishwasher right? And then I can treat my wife in the loving way that she deserves.
Yeah. Such a good example, because it's something that it's such a common argument in relationships and just with small things where it's like, well, this is the right way. It's like, okay, is this the hill I'm going to die on?
I shared that story in a keynote the other day, and the response from the audience, it was visceral. It was like, okay, I guess maybe it's not just my house where there's a dishwasher loading dispute. And to my wife's credit, she's I think accepted the fact that I'm never going to get it right, and it just is one of those things. Um, but Suzanne, I wanted to share something that I think might be helpful for your listeners, um, because self-compassion can be a relatively, it can be esoteric. It's hard to, like, it's not tangible. It's not. Give me the 5 steps to provide feedback or have the difficult conversation. This is a practice that takes on many different forms, and um, the way that my book is written is a choose your own adventure. Try on all these different things. See what works. They're not all going to be for you, and that's okay. But you got to find kind of your own way to have your own relationship with yourself. But one thing that I have found to be really powerful for people is a declaration. And this in itself takes courage, because it's some of the things that are in the declaration. You're like, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. It feels so kind of cringy. Um, and I'd like to read it in just a moment, but I shared this in a keynote recently, and the response from the audience, a pin could drop how much this hit home for people, as I just read the declaration for myself. And then one of the members of the audience said, would it be okay if we reread it, but we did it all together?
Mm.
And so now there's 150 people reading this declaration for themselves. And I don't know if there was a dry eye in the house afterwards. And it wasn't, this wasn't performative. This wasn't, I'm trying to feign, vulnerability. It was, to be able to speak to ourselves in a loving way is difficult because we don't do it. And it's powerful because we don't do it. And so sometimes it takes just the first step to invite people and show them, like, this is what it can look like, and get a taste of it. Because it's a bit like a drug. You get that initial high, and then you want more of it. A good drug, a healthy drug. And so I always try and get people as close to the epiphany to have that high of, wow, this concept of loving myself is pretty great. I would like more of that in my life. Then you're much more inspired and more inclined to pursue it, to create space for it and make it a priority. So would it be all right if I
Please, I was just going to say, you don't need my permission. Go.
So, and this is something that I discovered from a gentleman named Bob Dunham, who runs the Institute for Generative Leadership. And so this is inspired by him. So this is my declaration. I am a human being. I am only a human being. I am not Superman or Superwoman. I'm not perfect. Perfection is only a story good for suffering. I've been living that story my whole life. But now I see that it's just my story. And I can be the author of my story rather than a victim of it. This old story is just an echo of an old conversation that got trapped in my nervous system and has been haunting me ever since. But it's not the truth. It's just a story. I'm not a machine. I'm a human being. And human beings are finite. They can't know everything. They can't do everything. They can't please everybody. But I can do a lot. I can make invitations. I can make requests. I can make offers. I can produce actions with others to create a shared future that we care about and make it happen. And that's pretty freaking amazing. And so I hereby declare a new story, that I am a human being, and that is enough. Thanks to life.
Beautiful. Beautiful for so many reasons. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And how long did it take you to write that? I mean, I know I've done some of these before, and it can take time to hone. I'm curious for you. What was your creative process?
Said, so this was based off of Bob Dunham's work. So he had a starting place, and I read that from time to time. I have different versions of it that I read. I find it incredibly powerful to read in community, meaning there's nothing that I just read that is unique to me. And one of the core tenets of self-compassion is that we are not alone, especially when we're feeling heavy negative emotions or stress or anxiety, depression. It feels very isolating. And yet that is a human experience. And Anyone I meet, I know they felt sadness. I know they felt joy. I know they felt loss. They're human. And these are the types of things that we just overlook. But to speak it into existence, and I'm not talking about manifesting this, I'm just saying to say these words out loud is a powerful reminder of these things being true. Because the world around us, especially for people in leadership positions, is always going to ask for more. Always. Or if you're a parent, being a parent is always going to ask for more. And so the feeling of I'm not enough is always going to be there, because how can we ever meet the demands of always more?
Yeah.
But to be able to just remind ourselves of, we don't have to have all the right answers. We don't have to have it all figured out, but it doesn't need to be binary. If I don't know the answer to something, it doesn't mean I'll never know. It just means I don't know right now. If I'm feeling a strong negative emotion, I'm not going to feel this forever. What I can do is connect to others and realize, hey, this is a human experience that I'm having, and remove myself from it a little bit and ask, like, what is this emotion an indication of? What is it teaching me? I think of all of our feelings, Suzanne, is they're just data points.
Yeah.
So those that are like scientifically inclined and researchers who would say, I don't like to be tapped into my emotions. It's just a data point. You're feeling nervous. It might be an indication that you care about what you're about to do. That's a pretty human experience too. That's pretty cool. So anyways, thank you for letting me share that. And every time I read it, I get just a kind of a tingling feeling. And again, there's nothing in there that's about how great I am or how successful I am, or, it's a reminder of how human I am. And the more I can connect to that, and the more that anyone can connect to that, then you're coming from that internally resourced place. And I am a much, much better leader, executive, business operator, father, husband, son, because I remind myself that I'm just human and I'm just doing my best.
Beautiful for so many reasons. Thank you for reading it. The other thing that's really striking me about it is that you're not asking yourself for forgiveness. You're giving yourself grace and you're giving yourself love. I mean, like, it reminds me of a quote from your book. We wake up most days trying to be someone we already are. And it's almost like that idea of just accepting yourself and loving yourself, regardless of what that looks like.
Yeah. And reminding ourselves of who we are. If the talk track in our heads is pointing out all of our failings and our shortcomings and comparing ourselves to how we're not as, good looking or successful or what have you of other people, then that's how we're going to start to see ourselves. I'm not a firm believer in, looking in the mirror and saying you're awesome 5 times, or, trying to pump yourself up. I'm just saying, like, let's be honest. But if we're only looking at our shortcomings, that's not honest. Neither is only looking at our successes. Let's look at both in the context of we're human. And every client that I work with that is facing something that seems insurmountable, they know that they've been there before, a time in their life where something seemed insurmountable and they got to the other side because they kept going, right? That's that internal wisdom that you got to tap into. So it's already there. Like you said, our clients already possess it. They just need to be reminded of it. It needs to be surfaced for them. And that's why self-compassion is a practice, meaning it's a daily exercise. It's a daily commitment. No one's ever going to get a certificate in self-compassion and be like, well, I checked that box. What's the next thing I can learn? It's just not one of those concepts. And that's what I love most about it, because there's no pressure to get it perfect. I mean, there's weeks or months that go by and I realize, I haven't been very self-compassionate. I recommit. I don't beat myself up over it. It's like, okay, get back on the horse.
And I love that. Yeah, it is work in progress always, right? I mean, the idea of like never being done. And I also really appreciate, I mean, I know, the research tells us that if we beat ourselves up, we're really not any more productive. I mean, like, these are things that it is like, it's the dirty energy, right? It's the non-renewable resource. So I love that you're coming at it from that angle. I would also love for you to talk a little bit about your 6-step self-compassion framework, because as we have people that are starting to maybe come to terms with some of the costumes that they're wearing, What can they then start doing?
Yeah. So as I said before, it's written as a choose your own adventure, or, the metaphor I use, who loves to cook, a free Sunday for me when I get to be in the kitchen all day is a happy day, is that we're cooking in the kitchen together, and we're going to try out different dishes, and we're going to taste, and we're going to see what's missing. Does it need a little more salt, a little bit of fat? What's the dish need? A little acid? And um, so this is influenced by Kristen Neff's great work in self-compassion. The last 25 years, she has been the leading researcher and expert in the space, and really brought self-compassion to the forefront, specifically in the Western world. And in that model, there's three components. The first is self-awareness. As I was talking about, our emotions are data. So to be self-aware is the ability to just constantly check in throughout the day. What am I feeling? How am I doing? Not in the sense of, oh, I'm just busy, or my calendar's full, but like, how am I actually feeling? And I think about that as our emotional fluency. What sort of clear descriptors can we use to say what we're feeling? Is it sadness, or is it disappointment? What's the flavor of it? The second piece is around common humanity, which is what I was speaking to before, around connecting with other people. I feel sadness, so have other people. I'm not alone in this. For those people that are being laid off or have been laid off recently, that can be really isolating. You're not alone. Or you're going through divorce. You're not alone. There are people that have been through these things before and they have survived, but you're not alone. And then the third piece is around self-kindness. And this can take on the form of going for a walk, drinking some water, going to bed early, or more courageous self-kindness, which would be acts like saying no to something, even though it's difficult, setting a boundary, ending a relationship that's not healthy, even though it might be hurtful to that person. They're not the easy things to do, but they're the right things to do because they're kind to yourself. So my framework looks at these three different lenses from 2 points. So when we think about self-awareness, there's inward and outward. So inward is, what is the internal experience I'm having? What am I feeling? And what are my thoughts? What are the stories that we're telling ourselves? And a good way to check that is to journal for 10 minutes a day for a week. You can go back and read your journal entries and see what came up day in and day out. It's typically a story that you're going to keep telling yourself. And as you journal it, you get some distance to it. It becomes objective. And then you get to ask, is that a story that I still want to tell? Is that story serving me? Or is it time to rewrite it? Around common humanity, it is backward and forward. Backward is about looking at what has happened in our life up to this point. Our successes, our failures, our culture, our values, our experiences, and how are those shared amongst other people? For example, Suzanne, I was a college dropout at one time, and I identified as a college dropout. And I know the guilt that goes along with that, the shame that goes along with that, the chip on the shoulder. I got to prove people wrong, the fear of judgment that goes along with that. I don't feel that way at all today. But when I talk to people that are in that place, I can connect with them. I can relate to that. That's important for me to be able to do, to connect. And the forward piece of it is about, what are my hopes and dreams, my ambitions, and to realize that the things that I want for myself or for the world in the future, I'm not alone in those either. Because sometimes our ambition and our goals can feel very daunting. And when we isolate, they can feel selfish. Who am I to want that thing? But if you realize, well, other people want those things too, then you start to operate from a position of compassion, because you realize you're not alone in this. This isn't selfish that you want it. It's human that you want this. And then the third piece around self-kindness, those two directions are leeward and windward. And leeward is the side of the island that is going to be more dry and arid and is away from the storm. And the windward is the side of the island that gets the storm. It gets the rainfall. It's much more lush. So the leeward is the protected side of the island. And that's where our acts of self-kindness come in, to do those things that are small gestures. And I'll give you a very simple example. If we put our hands on our heart just like this, and I had a yoga instructor the other day actually show me you can interlace your fingers and do the same thing, and it gives you a nice stretch as well. This is a gesture of kindness for ourselves, but it is a form of touch that releases oxytocin. So we are promoting good chemicals in our body to support our well-being, but it's also a gesture of self-love and of strength. I've got you. I trust you. And sometimes we need that, especially when the people that we think should be doing that for us are not coming to our rescue. We can do it for ourselves. So those are leeward activities. Windward activities are about setting boundaries and having the courage to have the difficult conversation. It's asking for feedback when you don't want it. It is not the stuff that feels good, but you know that it's good for you. And you know that it's the right thing to do for you. And the idea of these 6 different directions, they all enter into self-compassion. There isn't one way to get into it. They're all different ways to practice it. And I encourage people to try them all on. And sometimes the day, the situation calls for one. It's really easy to know, right now I just need some leeward kindness, or I need some windward kindness, or I'm feeling really isolated right now and I got to tap into my values and my purpose forward. Or I need to tap into what's the journey that I've been on? How can I look back and kind of celebrate, what it is that I've done and what I've learned from this point, so I don't feel so alone and disconnected in this. Or maybe it's just a simple awareness exercise around where am I now? Because I'm spinning and my default mode network is engaged and I'm on autopilot and I'm just running from meeting to meeting to meeting and I'm miserable. And I know that if nothing changes, then I'll stay in this vicious cycle, but I don't even know where to start. Start by tapping into what is here and present for you now. And that takes practice. It's like learning a new language. To be able to identify our emotions it's a new language set. And Brene Brown's book, the name is escaping me. It's right behind me, I think.
Atlas of the Heart.
Atlas of the Heart is the most brilliant. It's like the Rosetta Stone for emotions.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to learn the language of emotions, it's the best book out there for it. To increase your vocabulary around that is so powerful, because I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this, but I oftentimes will meet people or get on calls or running events and check in with everybody and ask them how they're doing, and the response I get is, I'm good, busy. Well, busy is not an emotion, and neither is good.
Yeah.
So what that tells me is that person doesn't have the vocabulary to really know, and they're not used to someone asking them that question and actually wanting to know, how are you? So I'll pause and I'll ask the question, I really wonder, how are you? How are you feeling? I imagine you're good, generally speaking. And that's kind of most of our baseline is good. And I imagine you're busy, because who isn't? Right? But I want to know how you are doing. And that's how we can offer compassion to other people.
So simple. And but so powerful. And that's the thing about this work too, is I think that people, going back to what you said before, we tend to think it's something soft and it's fluffy and it's not needed. And because it will, in some way, will lose our edge, it takes us out of being what we're capable of being, when in fact it does just the opposite.
Yeah, it puts you on firm footing, because when you're playing the role of the second job, wearing the leadership costume, trying to project somebody else, you're off balance.
Yeah.
Because you're always trying to be and kind of morph yourself into who you think that you need to be. That's not a position of strength. It's a myth. But when we're grounded in who we are, then you kind of become like Neo in the Matrix. You see the bullets coming before they hit you, and you can step out of the way. And sometimes you might get hit. I still get hit from time to time, but it's sustainable. And I hope everybody has a long, healthy, prosperous life. And yet, so many people are just chasing from one burned out thing to the next, and it's very frustrating, Suzanne. I wonder if you experience this, that in the world of coaching, in personal and professional development, there are so many people that are kind of selling a quick fix. Do these 5 things. Follow my program. All you have to do is create a mantra or a vision board, and you'll have it. It's like, this isn't necessarily hard work, but it's never done. There's no finish line. Your ego is not going to die. It doesn't exist. So the orientation to this needs to be like drinking water every day. We need to eat every day. We brush our teeth every day. This is just, you don't have to always like it, but there's no quick fix. And fortunately or unfortunately, while I'm out here talking about it all the time, you don't need to. You don't need to go around telling people I have a self-compassion practice. I do it because I want more people to have it. But it's you don't go around telling people you brush your teeth every day. Do it for yourself and try out these different avenues into self-compassion and figure out what works well for you. It's not a one size fits all.
I love that. I love the idea of just integrating it. And you have to start somewhere. And I like to think of it as repatterning, understanding like this is my habit. Like we talk about, like Tim Ferriss, atomic habits. Like what are the things that we do on a day-to-day basis that we don't even know that we're doing?
Yeah.
And what is that? How is that potentially burning us out? How is that taking us into a place where we don't necessarily want to be? And you're making me think too, as we round out the conversation, the purpose of the pause. And I know that you're doing work with this. I mean, you mentioned before, so many people have been laid off. There's a lot of people that are in career transition right now. Talk a little bit about what you're doing in this pause area.
So there is an opportunity that presents itself when we are in between roles. But it's hard to see it as an opportunity because from the moment we enter kindergarten, grade school, we are essentially in a structure that is a ladder that we get to climb. We go up in the grades, we finish school, we go into the workforce. Now there's a ladder of progression with titles. And so we climb that. And then we find ourselves in between. And in the in between space, there is shame, there is guilt, maybe there are mistakes that we made, there's blame that we want to put on others or ourselves. And our natural reaction is to just jump to the next job. I just got to pay my bills. And I get that people have bills to pay and mortgages to pay and all of that. But it is an invitation to look at that time as the neutral zone, which is based on the book from Transitions from Barry Johnson's work. And it's a brilliant concept. And it is essentially saying that there is the ending and a beginning. And we typically just jump from the ending to the beginning. But in between, there's a space called the neutral zone. And it's an opportunity for us to ask questions that we might not know the answer to yet, to try to do things out, to let go of old things that are no longer working for us, to bring into light new parts of our identity that we want to be true, to experiment and try things that we've been interested in doing, but we didn't think that we could before, and to let go of the shame and the resentment that we might be carrying with us so that when we go into the next thing, whatever it might be, we're grounded again. We're actually coming from our best self as opposed to, I just had to get through the unemployment and survive. And that's a scary endeavor to take on. But the time is there. It's presented itself. And most people just don't have a framework for how do I spend time in the neutral zone and come out the other side healed and repatterned and clear, and the author of my own story. Because if you're fixated on what does the organization or what do the people that I used to work with think of me, or what is the next employer going to think of me because I was laid off, none of those are your story. You're just speculating about what other people are going to think. And what I can tell you is that people are going to think what you tell them as long as it's honest. So what's the honest story that you want to tell? And that means don't hide the things that are your misgivings. And I'll give you a clear example, Suzanne. When I left the corporate world before starting my coaching firm, I was fired. Not laid off, fired. And it was a horrific experience. Absolutely awful. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I knew what I was going to do after that. I knew I was going to start my business. But I also knew that I couldn't start my business right away because I was damaged goods. My feelings were hurt. I was bitter. I was resentful. And that was not a recipe for success. So I committed to 6 weeks before starting my business to be in the neutral zone. And I had some serious goals there. And one is I needed to forgive myself because I felt like I had screwed up and that I was a bad person. And I wasn't, but I had to forgive myself. I also wanted to forgive the people that were a part of this happening because holding on to resentment for them wasn't going to do me any good. And what's the point? I wanted to let go of like what people are going to think of me or what people are going to say about me. It's out of my control. I don't know. The only thing that was in my control is like, who am I? What do I learn from this? And how do I continue with courage in a way in my life that is authentic to me and my values and my purpose? If I hadn't taken that time, I would have carried forward those stories, the shame, the resentment, the bitterness. And I don't know exactly how it would have shown up, but the fact that I was able to process that gave me a point of clarity. And that's what the neutral zone has to offer somebody if they step into it. And so we're working on launching programs for people that are in transition or want to be in transition, meaning they're ready to leave an organization, but they don't know how. And they want to do that unpacking and repacking work and make an internal shift so that they find that their external experience in the next chapter of their life is different than the current one.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the messy middle. It's a very hard place to be, but it's a very important place to be. I also want to ask you one last question, which is, what about people that are in organizations and would like to create change within their organizations? Any recommendations?
I think the neutral zone works when everyone is bought into the idea. So if you think about an organizational change, there needs to be buy-in from everybody that's impacted by that organizational change, that we're all going to be in the neutral zone. And the difference in organizations is those the people of influence and authority need to create the conditions for people to actually create the space to be in the neutral zone. And that typically is the hardest thing. That's true with any leadership development program or anything. Is, are you actually going to support people taking the time to do this important work? But the concept holds true. I mean, it could be for individuals that are just transitioning from one team to another or different management. But there's value in the pause and purpose in the pause. But it's counterintuitive. So it's like, wait, you want me to not do anything? I can't do that. It's the same thing. You want me to stop projecting that I'm, the best and the smartest? Yes, stop projecting that you're the best and the smartest. Again, courage. It takes a lot of courage to take that leap of faith and go, okay, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let that belief that that's what's keeping me safe go, so that the truth that's always been there, the part in ourselves that we just don't know, can reveal itself.
Thank you for that. A couple of things that I want to summarize that I heard from this conversation is the idea of, the power of the true power of the pause, and having an idea of what might be some of the stories that you're telling yourself. What are some of the stories that you're hearing from other people? How do we actually think about what that's telling us? To use that data, as you said, to be able to inform us, but not to define us, and to have that be in that neutral zone, to spend some time to be able to figure it out. And maybe understanding that, I love the idea of epiphany as a privilege. So maybe instead of the epiphany being foisted on you, how do you potentially create that privilege for yourself? And to understand that it's okay not to be bulletproof. And in fact, nobody is bulletproof. And the idea of how do we not just survive and get through this, but how do we all come out individually and collectively better on the other side? Any final thoughts as we say goodbye?
I would just say that for those that are considering the value of the neutral zone is to cap it to a certain amount of time. Give yourself 2 weeks or a month. It feels less daunting when you say, okay, it's just going to be this period of time. But then it's an invitation to don't do anything. That's when you do the internal work and you start to listen to what those emotions are and what are your needs. And there's rich information in there, but you got to slow down to let it surface. If you just keep running to the next thing or update your LinkedIn and your resume and you're out there looking for the next job and applying, you haven't created the space for it, and it won't emerge. And I look at this as it's just an invitation that I'm making for people. You have the time to do this. Take it, and don't take it from me. I've worked with, at this point, a few dozen leaders just in their own neutral zone in these transitions. And all of them say it's so hard to explain to people the value of it unless you're on the other side, which makes it very challenging. But they're so grateful for they did, because who they are today is significantly different than who they would have been if they just kept following the path of who they were. But Suzanne, this was a really a lovely conversation, and I'm very appreciative of the work that you are doing to demystify what courage actually means. and that it isn't necessarily something that needs to be even a badge of honor. Like there could be small, courageous acts that we make, and the only person that needs to know is us, and that's enough.
Thank you for that. I love how you captured that. That is very beautiful and sits with me deeply. So I'll go back to doing this as you give that to me too. So thank you. Massimo, such a pleasure. I really appreciate you being here. We'll make sure that all of your information is in the show notes. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Stay courageous. The Courage Effect is brought to you by Weller Collaboration. If you're looking for a leadership coach, maybe a speaker or a consultant to help you or your team be more courageous and adaptable, we would love to have a conversation. More information is available via the links in our show notes. Please spread the word about the Courage Effect. You taking a few minutes to rate or review your favorite episodes or share them with people in your universe makes a big difference. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. For more information about the show, me, our amazing guests, or you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, please contact us via our website at thecourageeffect.com. It takes a village to bring this show to you. I want to thank Alex Sandyforth for her production and administrative superpowers, Dave Nelson for composing our theme music, and I am your host, Suzanne Weller.